I've made a shocking discovery. I need you to get me in touch with NASA immediately.
NASA and I aren't really on speaking terms these days.
Oh, that'll change. When you tell them that the moon is out of orbit.
There's no need to panic.
Wrong face it!
Why are they lying about all this?
It's too late to stop.
We knew all this was happening before NASA.
You're the unidentified source?
Oh, yes.
We're dealing with an intelligent entity. We're planning a mission to attack this thing. I'm asking you for your help.
Say yes, Brad.
If the moon really is what you think it is, suit up.
You have got a big gravity wave coming your way. You have to launch now.
Did he say gravity wave?
We're underwater, guys!
That's crazy.
What's the plan?
Save the moon, save Earth. Wait for it. Let's go, you son of a...
Everybody, hang on. I'm gonna get you home.
From the most exotic locations on Earth, Moonraker will transport you to another world. To the most spectacular adventure in space, Moonraker. It's out of this world.
What exactly do you want to compare, Drax? Moonraker 1, liftoff. Moonraker 2, liftoff. Moonraker 3, liftoff. Moonraker 4, liftoff. What's that?
Entire city in space.
James Bond and the treacherous Dr. Goodhead. Despite your efforts, my finely wrought dream approaches its fulfillment.
We have liftoff. Space, so they say, is the final frontier. And historically, wherever humans have explored what they thought was uncharted territory, war and conflict have never been far behind.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It does require, however, our best effort and our willingness to believe in ourselves and to believe in our capacity to perform great deeds, to believe that together, with God's help, we can and will resolve the problems which now confront us. And after all, why shouldn't we believe that? We are Americans. So in your discussions of the nuclear freeze proposals, I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blithely declaring yourselves above it all, label both sides equally at fault, to ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil. After careful consultation with my advisors, including the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I believe there is a way. Let me share with you a vision of the future which offers hope. It is that we embark on a program to counter the awesome Soviet missile threat with measures that are defensive. Let us turn to the very strengths in technology that spawned our great industrial base and that have given us the quality of life we enjoy today. What if free people could live secure in the knowledge that their security did not rest upon the threat of instant U.S. retaliation to deter a Soviet attack, that we could intercept and destroy strategic ballistic missiles before they reached our own soil or that of our allies? I know this is a formidable technical task, one that may not be accomplished before the end of this century. My fellow Americans, tonight we're launching an effort which holds the promise of changing the course of human history. I ask for your prayers and your support.
When it comes to space, too often, for too many years, our dreams of exploration and discovery were really squandered by politics and bureaucracy, and we knocked that out. So important for our psyche, what you're doing. It's going to be important monetarily and militarily, but so important for right up here, the psyche. We don't want China and Russia and other countries leading us. We've always led. We've gone way far afield for decades now, having to do with our subject today. We're going to be the leader by far. We're behind you 1,000%. When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. So important. Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the 6th branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement. I am instructing my administration to embrace the budding commercial space industry. We are modernizing out-of-date space regulations. They're way out of date. They haven't been changed in many, many years. And today we're taking one more step to unleash the power of American ingenuity. In a few moments, I will sign a new directive to federal departments and agencies. They will work together with American industry to implement a state-of-the-art framework for space traffic management.
Welcome to the first anniversary of that branch of our armed forces that will ensure for generations that America remains as dominant in space as we are on land and sea and air. Welcome to the first anniversary of the United States Space Force. It is my honor, on behalf of the President of the United States, to announce that henceforth the men and women of the United States Space Force will be known as Guardians. The space race began in the 1950s and it continues today.
When the U.S. Space Force launched in December of 2019, it became the first new branch of the armed forces in 73 years. Bipartisan lawmakers signed the National Defense Authorization Act as Washington recognized the need for security on a new frontier. The agency is now making major advances to stay ahead of competitors in space, including China and Russia. Joining me now is Major General John Olson. He is the Mobilization Assistant to U.S. Space Force Chief of Space Operations. He is also a U.S. Air Force reservist. General Olson, so good to see you here in person. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you.
This is some interesting stuff we're going to break down. Let's start with, on Earth, we're seeing increasing threats from countries like China and Russia, who also have robust space-based capabilities. How is competition looking in space right now? And what work is Space Force doing to outpace them?
Well, it's a great question. Space is indeed congested and contested. We've seen just a 46% growth in the past year. Launches are up. Spacecraft, particularly small satellites, are having an explosive growth period. But, as we look at global competition in this arena, it's absolutely essential for the United States to maintain and extend our leadership. It is a space race, is also a technology race. And at the core of that are data and AI and cybersecurity. So,
into the war in Ukraine, detailed images of battlefields taken from space and shared to battalions have shaped this conflict.
Strong.
Such important work and fascinating work here.
Conflict on the ground is only fueling the tension in space. In Asia, as China tries to intimidate both Taiwan and its superpower rival, the U.S. In Ukraine, where the Cold War has turned hot, with high-flying drones shadowing and targeting Russian tanks and troops. And U.S.-provided HIMARS rocket artillery proving especially lethal at reaching deep behind Russian lines in Ukraine to take out artillery and command bunkers and turning the war in Ukraine's favor. To keep flying through 2030.
Can we continue this relationship with Russia on the ISS indefinitely, or at least until 2031?
That is what is amazing. In the civilian space program, we can have this professional relationship that goes on without a hitch between Russians and American space flyers, while on the face of the earth, the leader of Russia is doing an unconscionable invasion of another sovereign country. It's incredible.
But the space station's science mission is very different from the military operations already underway in space.
With oceans and land and clouds, not a hint of a national border to be found.
Coming up, the new defense against a planet-killing asteroid and a new mission for America's Space Force.
2, 1. Oh my gosh. Oh wow.
Traveling at 14,000 miles per hour, NASA's DART spacecraft in time-lapse. Its final seconds before slamming into a harmless asteroid named Dimorphos, orbiting a bigger asteroid 7 million miles away. In typical NASA precision, bullseye.
Fantastic.
Then photographic proof that DART worked. That exploding cloud of dirt and rock, the moment the refrigerator-sized spacecraft crashed into Dimorphos, giving it a big shove, dramatically shortening its orbit even more than NASA had hoped.
It was expected to be a huge success if it only slowed the orbit by about 10 minutes, but it actually slowed it by 32 minutes.
A critical test if NASA hopes to use that same technique
to one day divert a mega asteroid from hitting Earth.
There's a comet headed directly towards Earth.
A nightmare scenario played out in Hollywood mega hits.
This comet is what we call a planet killer.
But potentially a real-life threat to the global population. NASA Chief Bill Nelson.
And it may be the clue of what we could do in the future to try to save life here on Earth.
NASA says it does not see any asteroid posing an immediate threat to Earth, but in 2013, a massive meteor escaped detection and exploded over a remote Russian village, injuring some 1,500 people.
Impacts from asteroids have had a profound effect on the history of life on Earth. You can ask the dinosaurs about that.
66 million years ago, an asteroid nearly a mile wide made it through the atmosphere, striking Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, wiping out most of the dinosaurs, much of the Earth's plants and animals, and triggering a massive tsunami with waves more than a mile high. Preventing a future meteor strike will require advance notice, a lot of notice.
It's very reliable that NASA and other space agencies can have decades of warning time, can track these things reliably for 100+ years.
With enough warning, scientists hope a DART-type nudge will be less risky than using a nuclear missile to target an inbound planet killer, but potentially creating a massive debris field. Part of the charge to America's new Space Force, partnering with NASA to detect and respond to just such a threat.
As they're looking out to deep space, trying to understand what is going on out there, perhaps looking for asteroids that could be a potential hazard to the Earth, we may have some capabilities that we can actually bring to bear to assist them.
And asteroids themselves may be rich in minerals.
They're metallic asteroids that contain more gold than have ever been mined in the history of the world, and other sort of platinum group elements that are valuable to our modern tech economy. So who owns asteroids? These are interesting legal frontier questions. So when you're going into space, it's not just the scientists, engineers, and the politicians. There are the ethicists. There's the frontier of space law needs to consider all of this, so that I would hope that as we move into space, as space becomes our backyard, that we know how to behave in ways that are for the greater good of us all.
NASA is all about the greater good. The new James Webb Telescope, 1 million miles from Earth, uses high-resolution infrared technology to view distant stars and black holes that existed hundreds, even thousands of light years ago. Meanwhile, America's future Artemis missions will carry astronauts to the lunar surface in 2025 at the earliest, 4 astronauts in the spaceship Orion. A much more comfortable ride than 50 years ago.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
Just like Apollo, the astronauts on Orion will lift off on their backs, but there's 30% more room inside Orion than Apollo, which means there's room for 4 astronauts instead of 3. Now, right over there is a retractable rowing machine for exercise, and right there is a commode. NASA is also testing out this new suit for future missions, replacing the suits worn by shuttle astronauts. The new suit, designed to keep astronauts alive for 144 hours should their spaceship lose cabin pressure.
You can see there's a little feed port here where, using a specialized bag design, we can put liquid nutrition in, think of like a protein shake, in there, and the crew member can turn their head in the helmet, be able to drink that, so they have the proper nutrition.
How is it in there? Is it hot?
It feels good, nice and cool, sir.
Cool.
Yes, sir. I have a cooling garment underneath. It has a tube that goes from left to right all the way across that keeps me nice and cool.
Even on a hot Houston day.
Yes, sir.
I can bounce gently in this spacesuit, and not very unlike what I can do on Earth.
At NASA's training pool, engineers and divers are already testing new suit designs for future moonwalks, covering the pool bottom with sand and rock to recreate lunar conditions, even planting the American flag.
This is very similar to what the Apollo astronauts did in preparation for their missions to the moon.
They've got to try to replicate what it's like on the south pole of the moon, where the sun is very low right in your eyesight, but everywhere else, it's pitch black.
NASA believes there's water ice on the South Pole, a potential source of drinking water and rocket fuel. But it's colder with less sunlight. Lisa Shore is the deputy chief of the Pool Lab.
So you're going to have this kind of dusk lighting, and then behind any kind of large rock or things like that, you'll have this long shadow where it's just going to be very dark.
It certainly is easier to drive when you're in the sunlight.
Absolutely.
Those shadows are so long.
Already, astronauts are using simulators to practice driving a rover on the moon.
So astronauts need to learn how to drive a rover without going into one of these holes and craters.
That's correct. You very often don't know how deep these craters are. It's difficult to tell how big these rocks are. So you have about 18 inches of clearance on your reference vehicle here. There are rocks that you cannot drive over.
NASA has promised the first astronauts to land on the moon will include a woman and a person of color.